Hello, boils and ghouls. My name is Ashley, and today I've watched the first Omen, which, for a prequel, not as predictable as I thought. Only slightly. So, this movie follows a nun in training named Margaret, who's traveling to Rome to take her final vows and work in an orphanage. Or so she thinks. There's some not so good things and not so good people waiting for her there, unfortunately. The opening of this movie is two priests, Father Harris, who, that name always makes me think of The Exorcist, and Father Brennan. And they're talking about a baby girl, and they're trying to, Brennan's trying to find her because, this is a prequel to The Omen, the movie that's about, Damien, the demon child, the evil child, and this movie focuses on how he came to be in existence, right? Which starts apparently it's been in the works for a while, right? What the church is doing here. So Brendan's trying to find this baby, and Harris really has nothing to go on but one black and white picture and a last name, Skiana, written on the back. And that's it. We don't see Father Brennan again for a while. But Father Harris is played by Charles Dance. So when I first saw him, I was like, oh, cool, they got Tywin Lannister. But he lasted all of 5 minutes because he heads outside. Brennan follows him. And they had some callback moments to the original in the tragic endings that would befall some of the characters, and Father Harris is one of them. In the original, there's a guy that got a whole bunch of rebar just through him. In a very similar way, Father Harris is taken out. One single pipe down the back of his head. But there was stained glass involved, and it was very similar. There's another one later on that is the same, but a step up from the original. But we don't see Brennan again until after Margaret arrives at Rome. It's like a while. I forgot he existed, actually, in this movie. I don't even think it was that long, but I forgot about him. When Margaret arrives, she meets up with Cardinal Lawrence, who is someone she had known for many years through her being a ward of the church her whole life. And my first thought when I saw him was, oh, this is some very obvious villain foreshadowing. He looks like Dracula, because he's standing there with his cardinal robes held out like this. And to me, that said, oh, you're one to watch. Also, he's played by the guy that plays Victor in Underworld, so maybe I just see him and think vampire, but he did look a little suspicious. Although I did think maybe it was so obvious on purpose that it was meant to be a misdirection. We find out later, no. He takes Margaret to the place she'll be staying at, which is like I don't know if it's a small house or an apartment or what, but the person she's supposed to be staying with isn't there, so she goes and gets ready for bed, and she hangs her habit on the wall. And I am a horror movie girly, so I'm in the habit of watching the background because something is usually happening a lot of the time, and if you hang something on a wall and it is a focal point and I see it clearly, I'm expecting it to do something, and it did. It full on turned into a demon nun a la The Conjuring, except it didn't look like Malik, it was just a creepy demon nun. And I saw that, and my thought was, okay, either this place is haunted, which, considering what this movie is about, unlikely. It could just be, the demon-possessed house. Or the girl has hallucinations, right? Which turns out it's the latter. Well, it's not really hallucinations, it's visions. And, I understand that's creepy and scary. After that happens, after that we meet her roommate, Luz. When she comes home from wherever she was out somewhere, and she's dressed in like regular clothes when we meet her, and then you learn that she is herself a nun in training. She's just going out and experiencing life before she takes her vows, which is probably a very smart thing to do, right? Before you make such a serious commitment like that, see the world a little bit, right? Surprisingly, to me anyway, she managed to talk Margaret into going to the club with her, which I feel is probably somewhere Margaret has never been before in her, well, it probably hasn't. She's been a ward of the church her whole life. But Margaret is sitting there, and the look on her face is me every time I'm dragged to a social event of any kind, especially anytime I've been dragged to a club, which it's been years and I hate going, so I'm glad I haven't. But she looks miserable. But she ends up adjusting to the environment and becoming comfortable. She's talking to this guy named Paolo, and she's dancing and having fun, and the next thing you know, she's waking up in her bed and her hair looks like it's been styled by Tim Burton. Every time her hair is down and loose, it does this weird, crazy, like, tentacle spiral thing. And it makes me think of Tim Burton. So she wakes up after her night out, and now she's got to go to the orphanage and watch these kids. As somebody who's worked in childcare on and off for like 20 years, let me tell you, not feeling well and having to go watch kids is not a good time. And I only watched 2 of them. As she's walking around, right, she's being introduced to people. She meets Sister Angelica, who right off the bat is a little bit weird. A lot of these people she meets are a little bit weird. Like, I don't think Angelica says anything. She doesn't talk very much the whole movie. I think she only talks twice, and it's very short. Like, she just says boy in Italian, and then she says, "It's all for you." That's it. That's all she says, I'm pretty sure, the entire time. So you see her, and she just is walking down the stairs, and she's kind of like looking away with her hand on the wall. So at first I thought maybe she was like blind or visually impaired, and I was like, all right. She's not. And she just stands there and she looks at Margaret and doesn't say anything, and I'm like, okay. And that to me was like, that's one to watch. She's a little bit off. But as Margaret walks around, she sees a labor and delivery room, because they also help with that there at this orphanage, which is great. And she notices on the wall a picture drawn by one of the girls. And it's one girl floating above all the other girls, and it's signed by Carlita Scianna, which, if you remember, the name on the photo that Father Harris gives Father Brennan is Scianna. But Margaret doesn't know that. She has no idea about the photo or anything, but that's just for us. We know we have now found that girl. What does that have to do with Margaret? We don't know. So Margaret introduces herself to Carlita. She finds her alone in a room that the other girls call the bad room, and the head nun says, oh yeah, well, Carlita's in there because she is violent towards the other girls. She acts out against the other girls. We don't ever see it in the movie, but they say she is, so they keep her in there. Margaret walks by the room at night before bed, and they're strapping this kid to the bed, and again, as somebody who's worked in childcare for 20 years, that makes me angry. I hate these people. It's your hint of something not right is going on at this place, you know? Because it's very much unnecessary. But yeah, as she continues to walk around and explore the orphanage, there is a woman there to have a baby. Margaret has another vision. She calls them visions, I think, that while this lady's having a baby, a whole ass demon hand comes out of this lady. So clearly these visions are trying to tell her something. That part got me. That's what bothered me the most this whole movie. Honestly, as a horror movie girly, and I grew up watching Nightmare on Elm Street, is my favorite. I don't get bothered by horror movies. I don't. They don't freak me out. I don't get scared. The only thing that bothers me is, like, if somebody falls and their bone comes through their skin. That kind of stuff bothers me. So this, nope. You can keep that hand to yourself. Just like, I understand why it was part of the movie, but I didn't need it to be part of the movie. Okay? Margaret blacks out. Right, she comes to, and they're all like, oh, don't worry about it. She sees the baby. The baby's perfectly normal. Nothing wrong with that baby. She was just having another vision, right? Which she really should be paying more attention to, but hey, whatever. She ends up going outside and finds Carlita sitting with Angelica, and they're drawing pictures, right? Carlita's drawing another picture of a girl with the baby, and that's when Angelica says, ragazzo, it's a boy. And Margaret's like, that's very inappropriate, because it is, and absolutely she should not be drawing that. It's weird. Like, it's a girl strapped to a bed, and it's weird, it's horrible, it's weird. And Angelica gets up and leaves. And this is when we see another callback to the original. Up above the kids playing is Angelica. And she says a line straight out of the original, where she goes, "It's all for you." In the original, it's Damien's birthday party and his nanny. So we're seeing tie-ins for Damien and, well, what you believe to be Carlita at this time, which is probably technically kind of correct. You know, and after that, the girls go on a field trip to a museum. In this movie, Italy has a problem with riots and protests at the time, and they honestly don't seem to serve any purpose whatsoever. Except for like this one small part, because after this it's never mentioned again. They take the girls to the museum. They're in these cute little blue hats and jackets, and they remind me of the girls from Madeline. They walk in two lines with their little hats and their little coats, and they're very cute. And that was also an orphanage, and I loved that. But as they walk in, the protesters come from around the corner into the square outside of the museum. Carlita and Margaret are having a conversation where Carlita tells Margaret that she has visions sometimes. She sees things. And I was like, oh, weird. They both have visions? Strange. What are the odds that your two main characters both have visions? Didn't dawn on me at the time that it might not be a coincidence, but it should have. And she lights herself on fire and jumps, and I was like, they took the same scene and made it worse. Something to that effect. And she runs off, and she goes and finds her and has another vision because Carlita is sitting in a room on a bench, and you see the hand of a nun, and then as she moves around a statue, you see that it is like the ghost, I guess? I don't know if it's a ghost or what her visions are constituted as, but it's the ghost of Angelica is sitting there with her. Not really sure why. I don't know. She kind of gets haunted by Angelica because you see her again later. And it's in that moment that the head nun comes and says, hey, we gotta go. They're rioting in the square. So it's chaos as they walk outside trying to get the kids back on the bus. And Margaret is just like getting thrown around, whatever, bounced around by people. And then you see like a demon hand come up and grab her, and then she gets licked by a demon. Like, I think the riots only existed in this movie for that to happen, right? She has another vision or experience or whatever this counts as because the riots kind of like created the chaos, and then I think there's like no riot mentioned ever again. They just like it's not important to the movie the whole rest of the time. So, it served its purpose and it's done. But the whole demon lick in the face thing grosses me out. And that's something Carlita did also, and I still don't really understand why. When she first meets Margaret, she licks her in the face, like licks up her cheek, and it's gross. And then this demon during the riot does the same thing. I guess you're supposed to draw parallels of she did it and this thing did it. She's got the name of the kid in the picture, so she is also like a demon child like Damien. Right? But a lot of this energy is just focused on Margaret. Well, why? Still remains to be seen. Again, I should have seen it coming. Disappointed myself that I didn't. The next, like, major thing that happens is Luz takes her vows. During that, Margaret kind of wanders off, right? And, like, I've been calling it her Nancy Drew moment. She goes into the head nun's office, and she's suspicious now. Like, she had been approached, Margaret, earlier in the film by Father Brennan, and he's explaining to her about weird things going on and basically about this girl and what the church is doing and all this and that. And he's like, hey, if you notice anything weird, here's my card, this is where I'm staying, come see me, let me know. And he says something not right is going on here. As she is there longer, she does start noticing her visions, Angelica. So when Luz is doing her vows and the ceremony, Margaret wanders off into the head nun's office and is channeling her inner Nancy Drew, looking for clues. And she finds, under the desk, a key. Because of course that's where the hidden key would be. And it opens a panel in the wall that leads down to a secret room full of files, and all of these files say Skiana and a number, right? 1, 2, 3, so on. And I think there's like 13, 14, there's a bunch of them. There's a whole bunch of them. So she's looking through these pictures, these files, and they all have pictures of these babies, and they're all like horribly deformed and did not survive. And that's when she realizes Father Brennan was right. All these babies are born on June 6th in different years. Only one survived, but she grabs all of the files and realizes she needs to get to Brennan because he was right. She manages to make her escape from the secret room, and she tries to hide the files. I mean, I'm gonna say maybe this was the best take they got and this is why they used it, but like she throws a towel, like a dish towel, over him, but you still see him. Like the towel's kind of more over her arm than it is the files, and I'm like, they definitely see her with all of those files and would probably know what they are. Like, she looks the head nun right in the face and grabs Carlita, because she goes up to Carlita and says, hey, we need to leave. She was going to take Carlita with her to Brennan. She ends up just taking off, and they run into Carlita's room, and she hides the files under the bed and takes one of the slats to defend herself, which I would assume if you had something to hide, you put it under the bed because you have part of the bed in your hand now, but I guess nobody, none of the other nuns thought that far ahead. The one father that works there, you don't see him very often. He escorted her from the train platform to Cardinal Lawrence. I don't remember what his name is because we don't see him that often. Like, she asked him on the way to the museum about if he knew anything about Carlita, because Brennan had said all these kids are born on the same day, whatever, but he didn't know anything. Yeah, he finds the files under the bed and goes to get Margaret, who has since been locked in her own, like, bad room, essentially. And she's laying there on the bed, and again, we see the crazy Tim Burton hair, because she's begging to be let out, so her hair comes down, and again, it's crazy. It's in that room she has another vision of Angelica, and it's her, like, all burned and gross. And I have to say, the SFX used for the burns on Angelica were really good. I don't know who did it, but they were really good. But Father, I don't know his name, came and lets her out and brings her to Brennan, where they sit and they go through the files. And Margaret realizes there is a file for Carlita with a photo. And there's a file of another baby that survives that has no photo. Well, Father Brennan showed her a photo of a baby that's supposed to be Carlita, but it can't be because Carlita's file has a photo. So that's not Carlita in the photo. It's Carlita's sister, Margaret. Margaret is Carlita's sister, which I should have seen coming because they both have visions and all this weird shit's been happening. But she freaks out, understandably. I think anybody would. I would. And that's when she realizes that night I went out with Luz. And memories start coming back to her of a weird ritual in a weird room. Lots of people around, one of which was that Paolo dude. And Luz was there, and the dude she was hanging out with. But Paolo looked guilty as hell, right? Like, he didn't look at her really, like, he just very upset. She undergoes this ritual, obviously against her will. And it made me think was, like, obviously the whole thing was, like, a plot, like taking her to the club and encouraging her to drink and have fun, whatever, was like planned. It was intentional. She sees Paolo again on the street and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Like, you knew something. It very much seems like you were involved in this. Like, you know what was going on. Like, did they force you there too? Like, I don't think so. That's when Margaret realizes she very well could be with child, like demon child, and it's gross, right? Again, she's freaking out. So she and Brennan and the priest whose name I can't remember get in the car that's driven by this guy that seems very helpful. Like, he's always the one driving them around, but he never says anything, so I kind of forgot about him. And Father Brennan is taking her somewhere to have the situation corrected just in case there's a situation. Because I don't blame her for not wanting to be involved with this. It's crazy. All this to get people to come back to the church. This is the whole process. This is the whole point of this, is to give people a reason to be scared enough to come back. On their way, to wherever they were going. They get hit by a car. It's obviously the people from like the orphanage, whatever, trying to stop them because they know what's happening. They know she took off with the files by now. The only person that walks away from that is Margaret. And as they said earlier in the movie, this sort of pregnancy goes super quick. She steps out of the car and immediately water's breaking. It's gross. She's acting like kind of possessed, really. And the people who hit them show up and they bring her back. And she wakes up in that room. They inject her with something. And it knocks her out and she wakes up in the room, that weird ritual room. And Luz is there and Cardinal Lawrence is there. And he's talking to her as she's laying there. She's like, right. And he's like, oh, this is great. It's wonderful. It's going to be great. It's going to be fine. Wonderful. And they're going to do like a surgery, like a C-section on her. He, again, reminded me of Dracula because when he's done talking to her, he full on like glides away. Like they put Bill Nye on a dolly and just wheeled him away. I don't understand why he's that creepy. I don't understand why he is like vampire-y. You know, but that could just be me. That could just be me thinking it's vampire behavior, but he's obviously not really one. Obviously, but Margaret ends up having 2 babies. She knows that ideally the church needs a boy, right? There's only been girls up till now, and they need a boy. Has to be a boy. She finds out that there are 2 babies. One is a girl, so she gets a moment of relief. Okay, good. Girl. And then the other one, though, is a boy. She cries. Right? Because, damn. That's the last thing that she wanted. Was there to be a boy, because then now they're getting what they want. They're getting their, you know, Antichrist demon child, their evil incarnate, scare people back to the church child. She does a little bit of like deceit, maybe a little bit like emotional manipulation, like, let me hold him. A boy needs his mother, let me hold him. And they're like, oh, she's being maternal, give her the baby. So they give her the boy, who obviously we know is gonna end up being Damien. So nothing's happening. We know nothing's happening to this kid. Even though she grabs the scalpel and she's holding it and she's like, I will cut all of you and this baby. She can't bring herself to do it because it's a baby. But she does get Cardinal Lawrence in his Dracula acting ass, who deserved it because obviously he's high up in the order of insanity that is going on in this place. Luz ends up stabbing Margaret, like in the stomach area, and they take the boy that we know is Damien, and they leave. Everybody leave, and the head nun says, burn it and leave them to die. So Margaret and the daughter are trapped in this room that's on fire, but here comes Carlita, who we now know is Margaret's sister. Carlita comes in and saves the day. Also, by the way, if all these kids are born on June 6th, does Margaret not know when her birthday is, or did they lie about it? It's possible she just doesn't know her birthday, or they might have lied, but I don't see why they would need to lie about it. But anyway, yeah, Carlita manages to save Margaret and the baby girl, and the next time we see them, they are in a house in the woods, like a cabin in the woods. It's very nice and cute and cozy, and there's snow outside and pine trees, and the 3 of them are sitting at a table, and the baby's not a baby anymore, right? She's like a toddler now, and it's very sweet and cute. And we get one more instance of their, I don't want to call it visions, because this is like a Sixth Sense ESP, hey, there's somebody outside, even though they didn't look outside situation. So Margaret goes outside, and it's Father Brennan, who, shockingly, also survived this car accident. I don't really know how. I guess he was just unconscious and nobody checked. He shows up at the house and is trying to talk to her about, you know, what's going on, and the baby, the boy, Damien, and she's like, I don't want to know, I don't want to hear it. And he goes, you know, they'll find you one day if they want. Like he found her. If he found her, any of them can find her, right? And as he leaves, he says, you know, they named your son Damien, and now I want another Omen related movie, because now we know he has a mom, a biological mom that's still alive. He has a sister, which I never even considered the fact that he could have siblings. And he's got an aunt, right? And mom and auntie are definitely not on board with what's going on with this kid. Although, watching The Omen, I don't think that kid's gonna care what his birth mom says or thinks about any of this. I would love another movie that deals with Margaret, like, trying to find Damien. I think that would be interesting. To see something else come from he's got other family. In the original, the adopted father tries to take him out because he's this evil demon child. Well, what if it's Margaret or Carlita? Or there's like a thing where, like, maybe the sister's not evil. Because the girls don't seem to be evil. Margaret's not, Carlita's not. I don't know what they named the daughter, but she's probably not. Like, she didn't seem, she was also like a, you know, a toddler, so. Maybe the sister's like the anti-Damien, and we can get a movie like that. That would be cool. But anyway, yeah, that's all for this video. Please feel free to subscribe if you want. Hit the like button if you feel like it. And I'll see you next time. Be excellent to each other. Bye.